We meet each other on the eve of the last reset of patch 11.0.7 and season 1, because now, once we are gone through this week, we will enter patch 11.1. We will have this off-season week waiting for the full release of the season 2, the opening of the raid, of Mythic Plus, etc, etc. So it was a good time to revisit what we checked a few weeks ago, which was the current state of Mythic Plus in the PTR. So we went and picked the 50 highest Mythic Plus keys being done and logged publicly on the PTR in Warcraft logs to see what specs have been doing, right? We have picked up quite a lot of these keys, and all of them were around basically the high level that is currently being done in the PTR, between 14 and 15 most of the time. And also, more importantly, all of them are from basically this week, from this reset, from these past few days of this week of February, because of the balance tuning changes that happened in the past couple of weeks, to also see the effects, the results of this tuning in the PTR. There are still few things that needed fixing, like you can see here, the current BM Hunter doing just fine, and then you have the one from just a few days prior, where BM Hunter has its tier set doing 20% of your damage, which is not the same now that it has been fixed. However, this still will serve as a way to give you an idea of what our players thinking on playing for the next season, because just like we said a few weeks ago, what if this is just testing, this is just players trying to see what they want to play, maybe even they are trying to play multiple specs, they are checking out multiple specs on the PTR. That is all good and fine, but what if in these 50 keys you see that there are 35 protection warriors and 2 guardian druids? That might be a hint. That might be telling us that, maybe all of these tanks are not dumb. They are playing protection warrior so much because they think it's going to be strong in season 2. This was obviously completely imaginary scenario. There is absolutely no 35 out of 50 keys being done with protection warrior, but it was just an example. So we've gone and looked at the representation of the specs in these top 50 keys in Mythic Plus to try to gauge a possible trend coming into this season when it comes to Mythic Plus. So we are immediately starting. We are not even going to leave it up as a tease. We are getting the DPS out first. So when it comes to the DPS, considering there are 50 keys, so 150 DPS spots available, we have completely purged all of the ones that couldn't even make it in 3% of these slots, in 5 out of 150 slots. So all of the ones that are there, like Arms Warrior, Fury Warrior, Affliction, Demonology, Arcane, Frost Mage, Unholy DK, Devastation Evoker, Marksmanship Hunter, Survival Hunter, all of these specs are not here simply because they have just not been played enough, or in some cases not even there. In these 50 keys there are 0 of them. And starting from the bottom of these top results, we have to start with one, which is Augmentation Evoker. Augmentation Evoker was in 8 Mythic Plus keys of these top 50 keys being completed. And we start with Aug, not just because it's interesting for Aug to be so low, but also because we're not even going to start with Frost DK, because Frost DK is not even going to be here. Frost DK was in 3 keys out of 50 of these top keys being logged, which is interesting, of course, because right now both Augmentation and Frost DK have been very popular in Mythic Plus. Obviously, over time, Frost has been sort of battling it out and lately losing to Balance Druid, but Augmentation, of course, isn't. Augmentation has been by far the most represented spec when it comes to DPS, and right now in the PTR players are not really caring too much about Augmentation. Now, it's relevant again that the PTR is not nearly as organized and effective for an Augmentation Evoker. It might also be more boring to play an Augmentation Evoker in the PTR as well, so it definitely might suffer more from that. But even just from the public entries from PAGs, Augmentation wasn't doing nearly as well as their old current self. Together with Aug, at 8 out of 50, you also had Balance Druid. Balance Druid was in quite a few of these high-level keys, which is also, as mentioned, interesting because, of course, right now, these 3 we just mentioned, Frost DK and Balance Druid and Augmentation, are amongst the most popular in live. and yet here they are not even breaking the top 5 of the popular specs in the PTR. That's the interesting part, I guess, about these changes from live to PTR, about these popular specs, because after them there are a few other specs that have been popular already, even though not in the very super high keys, like Red Paladin. You know, Red Paladin was in 10 out of these 50 keys, and then matching them you had Havoc Demon Hunter, also at 10. Havoc was perhaps more followed recently because of the situation, let's call it that way, with Wounded Quarry, which was doing, let's just say, a bit more damage than expected. So perhaps more players were testing Havoc because of this current situation with their Aldrachi River hero talent in Mythic Plus. That might be why their popularity. It is currently still not really fixed, even now. Even a log from the 17th of February still has Wounded Quarry doing a ton of your damage. Either way, they were quite a popular pick in Mythic Plus in this past week, basically, in the PTR. And they were basically right at the bottom of the top 5 popular DPS together with Red. Into the top 4, there is a pretty hard-fought battle between two specs, Fire Mage and Beast Mastery Hunter. So Beast Mastery Hunter, what we just mentioned, has been bugged for a while in terms of results. Fire Mage, on the other hand, not really. These are just their default results in the PTR, which is quite good. But BM especially, you know, BM after the rework, even this one without a completely broken potent mutagen, is doing a ton of damage, especially now in burst. They have been doing quite well, even as mentioned, if we don't count their potent mutagen bug, and they have been very popular together with Fire Mage, which has been pretty much strangled the popularity of their other mage counterparts, Arcane and Frost Mage, practically not really seen in favor of Fire, which we mentioned last time. They were switching over to Sun Fury, which they are still playing, is still their most performing one. Of course, just in question still is the AoE version of Fire Mage is still using Pyro and Ignite Spreading. It's not doing the Flame Strike side of their talent tree, which was supposedly buffed and then buffed again, and then Living Bomb reworked and buffed and changed again. Still not being played. You're still playing basically your Fire Mage single target rotation to do AoE damage still. Now, we have, though, the two more popular ones for now. We have to, I guess we don't even have to start with it because nothing really is changing from what we mentioned last time, which is overall in these keys, the most popular pick overall has been Enhancement. So out of some 50 keys, 23 of these, so almost half of all of the keys, had one Enhancement Shaman. And about Enhancement, there is still the same thing we mentioned last time, even though last time Enhancement didn't just get nerfed by quite a bit. But you can see they can play the Tempest build, the Stormbringer build in a +14 as Enhancement and do top damage. Then they can move over to a 15 Darkling Cleft. Instead, now they play with Surging Totem and with Totemic, and now the results are still great. And this is from today, basically, yesterday, so it's post-nerf. It's after the spec itself being nerfed. Still doing great, so no reason for the spec to lose that much popularity in the PTR. The one slightly below them, but still quite popular, has been, actually, Destruction Warlock. 20 out of 50 of the keys that were seen here at this high level actually did include a Destro Warlock. Now, this is interesting because we have talked about this. Part of this power level is due to bugs, which are still present in the PTR, still exist about their Wither damage, around their Demon Fire, or rather their new added talent, presumably to make the spec more fluid and simplistic without you needing to actually click Channel Demon Fire and instead having a passive talent that does it for you automatically. Well, the problem is that that passive talent has about a 5 times higher proc chance than it supposedly should have, so now your damage is considerably higher when you are playing Hellcaller and when you are playing, of course, with this Demon Fire Infusion talent. So, you know, it's doing good damage, it's being used a lot. However, how much of this is due to the bug? And how much of this is due to even without this bug, the spec would still continue doing this well? Well, technically no, they wouldn't continue to be doing this well, but would they be nerfed or would they be going down enough to make it not nearly as popular as it has been so far in the PTR? That's the kind of the main question about the current situation of Destruction Warlock in the PTR. That's the main thing when it comes to Destruction, but besides that though, these were the more popular of the DPS specs in the PTR. So basically a mix between Enhancement, Destro, Fire Mage, BM. Those were the specs played most in the PTR. Now, the discussion for tanks and healers actually is going to be much faster. It's easier because when you look at tanks, well, the number for Protection Warrior and Guardian Druid is 0 out of 50, so we don't even get to talk about them. Not the same, but slightly equally depressing for Blood DK. There were about 4 runs, including a Blood DK in the PTR. Where things get more interesting is when you see Brewmaster being part of 7 of the runs, Protection Paladin being part of 11, and Vengeance Demon Hunter being part of 28. So obviously, once we move to our current live situation, that's not what we are used to. And this might be a hint that perhaps it is time for Prot Paladin to make way for the the Vengeance Demon Hunter comp, pretty much. So that could be a hint, right? It could be a suggestion on what to play next season when it comes to tanks, especially given the current, at least, popularity of Vengeance. Yes, just like Havoc, they do suffer, though suffer is a weird word, with the current interaction of Wounded Quarry with their kit, but definitely, at least when it comes to Vengeance, is not the reason why they have been this popular anyways, this extra damage given to them by Wounded Quarry. So, for tanks, the answer seems to be clear in the PTR, which is Vengeance. For healers, perhaps it is slightly more conflicted, but definitely not amongst a large number of healers, because the number of Holy Priest and Preservation Evoker and Resto Shaman is 0. The number of Holy Paladin and Resto Druid is 4 and 5. So, the odd one trick main going in the PTR, still testing Resto Druid and Holy Paladin, and then you have 15 out of the 50 runs having a Mistweaver Monk, and 26 out of the 50 runs having a Discipline Priest. So basically more than half, slightly more than half of the runs did have a Discipline Priest. It does track the current popularity of the healer in live compared to the current popularity of the healer in the PTR Discipline. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem, at least so far, to have been that much change to the spec, despite the actual changes to the spec is still primarily playing still exclusively with Void Weaver. It's just the same thing, except now you don't have your Rapture, which was a very good spot healing and rather defensive ability to prevent some damage instantly, which is not a strong point of Discipline, which they are losing now in this new patch. Besides that, not much changed, besides playing with Ultimate Penitence now replacing Rapture. However, it has continued to be doing very well, and by far the main choice of the healers' comps to go together. Still provider of course, Power Infusion, still provider of your stamina buff. You still have Lenience, which you were running before anyways in Mythic Plus for your 3% damage reduction in the key. And right now it's practically trying to split time between them and Mistweaver as their sort of duality of picks in Mythic Plus. For now, still, obviously, Discipline Priest is ahead by quite a bit. Of course, it's easier when number 1, Discipline Priest is already the meta option in live, so it's much easier to translate this into the PTR, and because Mistweaver is traditionally a not very popular type of spec. One of the major chances of Mistweaver of possibly becoming good is if you had, for example, Shadow Priest, extremely good, extremely high level. Now, we haven't touched Shadow Priest so far because there were 0 out of 50 of these groups actually having a Shadow Priest in it, right? There were just none. Nobody was running with Shadow Priest, despite not really being particularly bugged or broken, or even simming badly, or even supposedly, even from the results of the PTR raid testing, for example, Shadow Priest was still doing great. So it's just not that popular at the moment, and if it were very good, then maybe the stocks of Mistweaver would go higher up, because now you still have the priest in the group, which means you can now take over the healer on a different role than discipline. For now, it doesn't seem to be the case. But this was, in general, just a recap of how specs were leaning in the PTR when it comes to choices and options for the upcoming season, just to try to see the trend of the players in the PTR. Basically, try to guess if this is what players are thinking, this is what players are planning to play in the next season. Trying to get some hints from this. Yeah, sure, augmentation could still come up and be meta. Maybe, as mentioned, Shadow Priest would end up being meta and Mistweaver not really. But it's a bit harder to imagine, for example, Prot Warrior becoming meta when not a single one of these top 50 keys run a Prot Warrior compared to, say, Vengeance. Or imagine Holy Priest becoming the meta healer when none of the runs were running Holy Priest, for example, right? So obviously, this could be hints, and this could also be completely forgotten today or Friday when the next PTR tuning hits and we get some drastic changes and something gets turned upside down out of nowhere, which also is already happening from last week, for example, Warrior specs being giga buffed to the point that right now they are the highest simming single target specs. And up until a week ago, this was not a thing. So PTR and tuning might still change much of this, but for now, this is how things have been going in the PTR when it comes to Mythic Plus testing. So for today, on this Tuesday, it is now time to leave each other. We are starting the goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who's been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, yeah, at least move it away from the camera so you don't have it straight in your eyes, you know?